Ronan, welcome to the pod.
Great to be here, Raul.
So, for everyone listening today, can you just tell us a little bit more about who you are and what work you're doing right now so that we can have that preface before we dive in?
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. So I, in my career, was a finance and a tech guy who became more of an entrepreneur as I got older. And further in my career, I've always been passionate about creating community, about creating shared experiences. I was thinking back before this podcast, remembering when I was in my 20s, I moved to Brazil and opened a bar on an island in Brazil. So I was into hospitality. And then when I really jumped into the founder experience, I started a company called Cross Campus based here in Los Angeles. And we built the largest tech startup community in LA through a shared office space concept. Ran that business for about 8 years. Unfortunately, the pandemic came and completely crushed the office market. And then that was an opportunity actually to join with an old and dear friend, a guy named Keith Ferrazzi, who is a wonderful man and author, the author of a great book called Never Eat Alone, an executive coach to some of the biggest companies in the world. And so I've been coaching teams, coaching leadership teams with Keith for the last 3 years. And
Mhm.
only in the last year did we spin off a new business called Connected Success, which is my primary focus now. And with Connected Success, we essentially train people to be more strategic about their networking and better at relationship building.
Was that like an insight as you work with executives and like you did your coaching that they lacked this skill set? Is that where that stemmed out of?
Yeah, not as much that they lacked it, Raul. Relationships are at the heart of team performance, period, right? Like the data shows that success for a company or for a team is more a function of the quality of the relationships than the skill set of anyone in to be a particular person. So in coaching, Keith and I are always
Mhm.
focused on how do you elevate the quality of relationships? How do you create higher trust through vulnerability, generosity, accountability? So relationships are certainly at the heart of teams. But the aha moment was more about thinking, we sat back and we thought to ourselves, 20 years have passed since Never Eat Alone was written and has become this networking classic. And we thought about it today, you can literally teleport into any Zoom around the world with anyone. You can meet anyone in the world today. In theory, that's possible. And with the AI tools that are coming out and with how powerful social media is, there's really no better time to invest in how you network than today. And
Mhm.
books are great for that. But when we thought about it, we were like, this needs to be a cohort experience. This needs to be somewhere where you practice with another group of committed individuals. That was more the motivation.
Yeah, it's more in the doing of it. Let's talk a little bit more about that and how you approach strategic networking because in the lay of the land that I'm seeing in like the entrepreneurial world, you're right, leveraging AI, but some people depend on AI to write everything from the sequences to the emails to the outreach. And then when you show up, it's okay, when am I going to build a real relationship? So talk me through your intent behind relationship building, because in my opinion, it might start even before you have that initial phone call.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, look, Ro, my philosophy on AI, maybe like others, is use it as much as possible. Like I used to craft long emails asking for an introduction or asking for help. And 45 minutes would pass and I'd get into my head and sometimes get into my head too much. Now AI does that kind of stuff really well to leave this sort of personal element, the authenticity to the actual interaction. But listen, networking is interesting. It's got a little bit of a negative connotation to a lot of people. It feels icky to people in the
Mhm.
program that we're running. A lot of it initially is just getting them into a new mindset where they're getting past that limiting belief. For so long, and I think a lot of us have experienced this, networking is this hunter and hunted mentality. Like you go to a
Mm.
conference and everyone's hunting the investors at the conference and they're protecting themselves. A lot of people have had experiences. I know I have. I remember years ago, I went to a conference. I was talking to someone, and as soon as they found out that I wasn't a buyer for their product, like I wasn't never going to be an SQ, the person just literally without saying goodbye, just turned and walked away. So
It's terrible. I've had that too, where you're not important because you're not in my target market. I'm like, I get it, but then it's also we're here. Like it's a social thing. You got to be social.
the key to sales and to many other things is focusing on the relationship first, right? You build
Yeah.
likability, you build rapport. And from there, that's when you have trust and that's when you can start to help with your product. But there are a lot of mindsets, a lot of myths about networking that we just wanted to bust right off the bat when we brought people in and develop that mindset. Myths like you have to be charismatic to be a great networker. Absolutely not. You have to be focused and present to the person you're talking to. That's the thing that people respond to. When you look at
Mm.
people like my business partner, Keith Ferrazzi, or even politicians like Bill Clinton, who are famous for this, they just zoned in on you when they were with you and you feel like you're the only person in the room. So the shift is from charisma to focus. extroverts, introverts. There's this, myth that you've got to be an extrovert. And in fact, introverts actually have a lot of advantages. They're actually, the data shows they're more thoughtful often. The fact that they're more introspective makes them better listeners, better in conversation. But of course, they don't have the same appetite to meet with people all day long. They need to recharge and recover.
Mhm.
Another myth is I met someone, I made a strong impression, we had a great experience, I'll be on their radar screen. That's wrong. You've got relationship decay that happens after about 2 or 3 months. You're no longer top of mind. You fade in their memory. And so that really systematic follow-up schedule and having a system for your follow-up keeps you top of mind. Super important. And then finally, the biggest one, I think, is the myth of small talk. The myth of small talk, this idea that don't go deep too quickly. People want to start slow. And there's some fascinating research that essentially, and I'll skip through all the details of it. We could certainly nerd out on this, but the gist is that people actually love talking to strangers and love opening up much more than they thought that they would. And so
Interesting.
if you know how to create that space of opening up and vulnerability, and it's really a dance, a conversational dance, that could be really powerful.
That's fascinating. I like those mindset shifts. When you define, how do you define strategic networking? So this is more like the mindset's belief so that I can show up to the
Yeah.
situation or to the room or the virtual room. But what does it actually look like? What's the
Yeah.
process feel like? Or how do we execute that?
So that's a great question. So I'll point to a few things. One is intentionality and purposeful approach. So in your podcast description, I was reading, I actually love this. You put effort, discipline, and focus that goes unnoticed. And when you look at the people who are masters at this, they do make it look easy, but behind the scenes, there's a system, there's intention. So doing things intentionally. Now, intentional doesn't necessarily mean inauthentic. So you can
Mhm.
decide very intentionally, hey, I want to invest energy and I want to lead in with generosity to Raul because I think he's a good guy. I think we have things we can do in the future. I don't know what those things are, but I want to invest in the relationship. That's intentional and purposeful, but it's also authentic. There's nothing inauthentic about that. As opposed to what a lot of people do, which is, hey, I meet people and we connect and we like each other. Let's follow up. And then more often than not is they don't follow up and they lose touch and they get frustrated. Boy, why did I lose that momentum? It's because you didn't start from a foundation of what are my goals? Where am I going? What do I want my network to look like? And who am I going to decide to invest my energy into? Because our energy and our time is limited. So that intentionality is key. The other component, the other really important thing next to it is a system. And
Mhm.
that's what, when Keith and I sat down to design this, the real North Star here was we wanted to build a playbook. We wanted to build something that showed you exactly what you needed to do, when you needed to do it, how you needed to do it, because so many people lack that organizational structure.
Mhm.
And when we now we're doing a lot of our feedback and surveys from this first run of the program, a lot of what people are saying they got was that system that they can now use and tailor to their own life.
No, I love that. Even just listening to how you laid that out, I took a note around, okay, 2 months, I should be following up with people around 45 days to 60 days out. And the key of that was the second question is, okay, so how do you stay in front of people?
Right.
And if your network grows to a certain size, should you consider, I wouldn't say automating in the term of like just a bot, but there are ways to look human to create that touch so that you're top of mind. If it's visiting their LinkedIn, if it's leaving a comment, there could be a way for that to be there, but it does take energy. That's the one thing that I also, you nailed it on the head, limited energy and time. How do you work with the cohorts, but what are the things that maybe the question is, how do we intentionally focus our energy
Perfect.
in knowing who to reach out to? Is it based on just your goals? Is it based on potential future business, future opportunities? Because I think that's the number one key thing that I hear a lot is, hey, I just don't have the time,
Exactly.
or I'm just super slammed and busy, especially with business owners.
Exactly. Let me give you three ideas. One of them is focus. The other one is carving out time in your calendar. And then let's talk about what it means to follow up. And we think about the concept of packets of generosity, not necessarily filling up, but just throwing out little bits of generosity to the people you care about. Right. So first, focus. Less is more. Right. Less is more. There's a really interesting in the 50s who was a primate specialist, and he theorized, his name is Robin Dunbar, and he theorized that there's a limit to how many people, how many meaningful connections we can hold in our brain as humans. And that number, it's often called the Dunbar number, is 150 meaningful connections. Now, the science behind it is dodgy at best, right? He compared the brain size of monkeys to the brain size of humans, looked at the social group size of monkeys and extrapolated from there. But it is interesting, right? 150, there's a limit to how many meaningful connections we can hold. Oftentimes, people don't realize it's more valuable to go deeper with a smaller group of people, develop the intimacy, develop the rapport, become one another's champions, co-elevate together, than it is to spread yourself wide and focus on a lot of loose connections. And if you want to go deeper and you do the math on how much follow-up you need to do, right? If you're going to do a bit of follow-up every 2 months on 30 people versus 200 people, you realize very quickly that above 20, 30, 40 people, it's impractical. So the first key is have a dashboard, have the 30 to 50 people that you want to focus on. And we can put aside the why them, that's a whole other conversation, but have a dashboard and focus on those people. Have something that you can look at all the time and come back to. Your CRM is great, but there's a lot of noise in it. There's thousands of people in it, all sorts of data. Don't get lost in that. Right. So that's one. The other piece here is this isn't just going to happen. A lot of people think about networking as, okay, when I have some free time, I'll send some emails or I'll comment in social media. The mindset shift here is to realize this is a core activity. For so many of us in the professional world, this is a core activity that will drive your success. Treat it as such. Calendar, protect that time. There was a fascinating piece of research published last year in the Harvard Business Review, and they tracked 2,300 professional services partners at firms throughout, I think it was New York City or throughout the Northeast. And they wanted to look at what made the rainmakers so good at what they did. And so they found that there were 5 general personas for how people did biz dev. They were like the experts. These are people who spend their time writing articles in the market and pointing to that and saying, you should work with me because I'm an expert. There are the debaters who are like, I'll give you my honest opinion and I'm super smart, right? So there are these 5 personas. Turns out the persona that absolutely crushed all of them was a persona known as the activators. And all the activators, they had a few hours in their week devoted to nurturing their network. That's it. They spent hours in the week, that was time they protected, making introductions, commenting in social media, sending out interesting articles, thinking about how they could be of service to the people who they're focused on. And the difference in revenue generation between them and the worst performer, which funny enough, the experts, 50% higher revenue between the activators and the experts. Not like a rounding error. This is significant.
Yeah, significant.
So that's the second thing, Rahul, is like change the mindset. Don't look at this as, oh, I'll get to it. Put it in the calendar and do it, right? Because there's an ROI to it. And then the final thing is we always hear about generosity and how powerful it is. It really is the only way to get there. You cannot be transactional. You can't be keeping score. That just doesn't work. You have to identify people who are special. You have to focus on them. And then you have to the mindset is, I want to see how I can help Rahul with whatever he's struggling with, whatever he's interested in, whatever is top of mind for him. And the package of generosity I mentioned earlier, this was a concept Keith came up with in the book. This could be as small as like hey, just thinking about you in that awesome podcast conversation we had. Thank you for having me on. Like just something that puts you top of mind. And there's got to be a regular stream of these things. Think of yourself as a line in someone's perspective, in their mind, not a dot falls away, just like a line that's ideally an upward sloping line. As you get to know the person, hopefully you meet in person, you understand their personal life, you get that vulnerability going where they open up to you. You're finding out more about their struggles, their dreams, their desires, and you're there to support them. You're not asking for what you can get back. Now at some point you've built up enough social capital with the person. And if you need something, they care about your success. You've been there. Now you can make the ask. But often people think about making the ask too early and they think transactional. Again, the mindset shift here is play the long game and lead with generosity. And here's why. I'll tell you something really interesting and very fundamental. If you meet someone and you look at them and you're like, should I invest in this person? Oftentimes, it's not the people in our network that potentially unlock value. It's the people in our network. It's the people that they know, the constellation of people in our network. So when I met you, let's say I meet you at an event, I have no idea who you know. I have no idea what you've done. But what I can do is I can quickly determine if there's likability. I can quickly step into a place where we're opening up and getting past the bullshit, the small talk. And then I can put myself in this frame of mind where I'm like, what does Rahul need? How can I be of service? How can I support him? My text is a second brain in real time. I'm getting that in my CRM. And then I'm focused on at least every month, I got to ping Raul with something. That's the secret formula.
I love it, and I appreciate that mix of 20 to 50 versus we have 150, 200 that we can remember. It's quite significant. And that's the key thing that you just mentioned. It's that constellation. Do you have any research or like interesting stats about the constellation that you can create? I remember reading one that the average human, and this again, like might be dodgy facts. There's no real hard study, but the average human can impact up to 10,000 people in their lifetime. So
Impact up to 10,000 people. That's a tough one. I wouldn't even know
yeah.
where. I've heard other ones like you meet 3 people every day. The average person meets 3 people every day at some point, standing in line somewhere. Focus really is the key here. As we hear as entrepreneurs, as founders, as professionals, it seems like the answer to everything is focus. Certainly here, less
Yeah.
is more, go deeper rather than broader.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other question too that I naturally support teams and founders with, but I'd love to get your thoughts on is I think we overcomplicate it, but I still need to ask the question.
Yeah,
So what do you actually say? Okay, let's send out gift packages or care packages or whatever. If it's an email, a post, a comment, a message, but people get tripped up on what to say. Do you see that a lot in your cohorts?
absolutely. And we actually have a week where we talk about conversational strategies. We talk about how to prepare for conversations. But give me a little bit more insight when you say what to say in what specific scenario.
Just
You
like
mean,
on following, hey, I'm just checking in. How are you doing?
I
I
got
think
you.
we
I
tend to
got you.
overcomplicate it. Just look at their website, look at their link, find something relevant, and just talk about that, just like you would at a burger lounge or
If
something.
it's, dude, I thought that post was really insightful and obviously you engaged with it, you liked it. If you run across something, you're constantly thinking about what's interesting to your network or to your sphere of focus. You're obviously sharing those resources. You're looking for opportunities to introduce people. But here's the magic of it. If you don't have anything, right, what are you going to come in with? It could be as simple as, let's say, you know what someone's doing and it lights you up and it's an awesome project and you want to support it. It could be like, hey, Raul, I love what you do with this podcast. How can I help? I don't know how, but how can I help? That question, how can I help, is what I call it one of the golden questions. Let people tell you you're already expressing generosity, creating the instinct for reciprocation. And oftentimes they'll be like, yeah, that's awesome. Would love to enlist your help. Here's another great question. When you are speaking to someone, let's say you have some mission, you need to make a contact, you need to learn something, you need to find a hire, you want to start a business, you want to leave your current job, you want to find a new job. And someone introduces you to someone, you're talking to them, you're getting that advice. One of the great things you end the conversation with is, hey, this was really awesome. Who else should I be speaking to? Is there someone either specifically, or even what types of people should I be speaking to? Should I speak to a different type of person? So you create this sort of chain, often a chain of introductions that gets you to the right people, right?
That makes a lot of sense. I like the strategic approach to asking the right questions. It could be a good lead magnet for you guys.
We've got a whole week we do on asking depth provoking questions, which is
Ah,
super, super fun. And I can give you an example of that if you want. It's a really interesting body of research now where, a lot of people struggle with conversation too. They're afraid that the conversation is going to go flat. They're not going to know what to say. So let's say, all right, let me give you an example. I'm getting to know you on a call. We're starting to get to know each other. I go, yeah, awesome. Hey, so are you in a relationship? What are you going to say? Yes. Oh, cool. With who? Tell me about it. Asking these close-ended yes or no questions creates a choppy conversation, right? Versus, are you in a relationship? Yeah. Awesome. Tell me, like, what's your dream weekend with your partner? Right away with question two. Now, keep in mind that you didn't just meet this person. You got a little bit of background with them,
yeah.
but right away you're going into this like aspirational open-ended question where you're asking about someone's dreams, right? If I'm
Yeah.
at a conference, a great question is, tell me about your work. What do you do for work? And someone says, they'll give you the answer. And a great follow-up question is, wow, that's awesome. Is that your dream job? Do you love doing that? And now you're getting them to talk about what they love and their dreams and values and judgments and beliefs. And that's what creates depth in conversation. So there's an art to asking depth provoking, open-ended questions versus close-ended questions.
Yeah. And it's to not to extract, but to let them explore and let them show you where their mind is leading, what their values are, where the other connections are. And I do appreciate that.
Let me share one more thing with you when we talk about questions to ask and how to engage someone in your network. Asking for advice is one of the most powerful things. If you talk to founders who have raised money, they might tell you that credo. If you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. Advice is it's almost like expressing generosity because people love to give advice. It makes you feel authoritative. It makes you feel helpful, generous, relevant, even. And there's an interesting nuance here. Rather than asking for feedback from someone, ask for advice. There's a subtle sort of psychological shift. Hey, how can I do this better? But asking someone for advice is a great way to engage them and then see where the conversation goes.
This is a really good section just to rewind and repeat and just take notes on how you're going to follow up with people. In your cohorts, there might be several, but I'm curious, is there a common theme or like a big aha moment for people going through that? I know there's probably several with the mindset shift. So what has been the number one prevalent aha moment for most participants that they get out of the experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been a blast, by the way. 65 people in this first cohort from all over the world. That's what's mind blowing here. 22 different countries, if you can imagine that. Like one or two people from so many different countries, different cultural backgrounds. Um, some of the biggest shift, and this is something that's been so gratifying to see because it goes beyond just networking, is I'm hearing things like, you've made me comfortable talking to strangers. You've helped me understand that I don't care if I get a no. I'm less concerned if someone says no to me. So we call it the zone of indifference. You make the ask, you set it up, separate your action from the result and be indifferent to that. So we've seen some real personal shifts. I heard one guy say, you've allowed me to be me. So we've taken off these layers that have held people back, these limiting beliefs. From a more tactical standpoint, a big thing is the system. Like now I know when I sit down, what I need to do and how to do it. And then finally, this mindset of leading with generosity. Like people really, that opened people up when we shifted from this idea of transactional to leading with generosity, which also, again, let's be honest, right? Generosity has to be a two-way street. So it's not like you have to be a martyr constantly helping people. So there were some fascinating discussions in our mastermind groups about what to do when you've helped someone a bunch, but then when you ask them for something, they're not there for you. Or how do you say no to people when they ask you for something? So there's a real sort of delicate balance there. But generally speaking, the way to view the relationship from a strategic standpoint is, I've decided I want to invest in this relationship. I am going to see how I can be of service to this person as much as possible. That's it.
And then from there, carrying on depending on where those doors open. I love that.
Right.
Ronan, for the audience here listening, where's the best place that people can, one, thank you for being on, and two, learn more about the cohort and the work you're up to?
Yeah, no, it's been great. Enjoy this conversation very much. The website is www.connectedsuccess.com. And if someone's interested in leveling up how they manage their network and how they go deep with people consistently, we're starting our second cohort in late September. We're taking all the stuff we did in cohort one. We're going to make the second program even better. And just to put in an application and book a call with one of our enrollment advisors. They're awesome. They will help figure out what you're struggling with. They'll give you some tips and advice and ultimately help you figure out whether the program is impactful for you. One thing I'll say also is that it goes beyond just a training program. What we're building here is a community. So the folks that we brought together, actually tomorrow night, 40 out of 65 are flying in to Keith's home for a graduation dinner, which is more than I would have expected going into it.
Yeah.
These people are flying from India, from Singapore, from London. And the reason they're flying in is because over the last 8 weeks, we've watched them build these really deep connections with one another online. And now meeting in person is very rewarding.
That's the next step. I love that. I'll put those links in the show note, Ronan. Thank you.
Thanks, Ro.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there, you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low-cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by going to dogoodwork.io/free
growth-resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-ins. You can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/free-growth-resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.